The morning fog rolled in over the naval amphibious base Coronado, softening the jagged edges of the coastline. Waves crashed relentlessly against the rocks below, a constant reminder of the unforgiving environment that had forged generations of Navy SEALs. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane stepped off the transport bus, her boots crunching against the gravel, her eyes scanning the compound with quiet precision. She had been reassigned here, not because she was new to military operations, but because this unit SEAL Team 7 needed a leader capable of balancing strategy, discipline, and instinct in ways that few could manage. For a moment, she let herself take in the sight. The early morning glow reflected off the hangars, the scent of salt water mingling with diesel fuel, and the faint hum of helicopters preparing for training sorties. It was a world she knew well, yet this time she felt the weight of every pair of eyes that would soon be on her. Sarah adjusted the strap of her duffel bag and walked toward the training facility. Even in her calm stride, she felt the invisible tension building. Word of a woman commanding a SEAL unit spread fast in these halls. She had heard whispers over secure channels before arriving. She's intelligence, not field. They can't let a woman lead here. It didn't matter. She didn't need approval, she needed results. Inside the locker room, the air smelled of sweat, gun oil, and old leather. The metallic clang of lockers echoed off the walls, punctuated by the laughter of men who had grown up believing nothing would shake their hierarchy. Some noticed her immediately, eyes widening in disbelief. A few leaned back, smirking, passing judgment without a second thought. "Looks like we got a visitor," muttered one man, tossing a towel across the benches. It landed with a thud near her feet. Sarah glanced down, raising a brow, but said nothing. She had learned early in her career that silence was often louder than words. The room filled with a mix of amusement and irritation. This was not the reaction they expected. "She's probably lost," another snorted, gripping a rifle and spinning it lazily between his hands. "Wrong locker room, sweet cheeks." Sweet cheeks. The words made her jaw tighten imperceptibly, but her face remained calm. Sarah had been mocked, underestimated, and doubted before, and in every case she had let action speak for her. She set her duffel bag down, opened her locker with deliberate care, and began changing into her uniform, her movements precise and methodical. The laughter escalated briefly, some of it daring, some of it nervous. One of the men, trying to provoke a reaction, leaned back and gestured broadly. "Hey, why don't you tell us where the kitchen is while you're at it?" The taunts bounced off her like water off armor. She didn't react. Her focus was already on the training schedule, on the operations manual clipped neatly inside her duffel, on the next steps that would define her command. And the door slammed open. The suddenness of it made everyone jump. "Ten hot," barked a voice that commanded obedience without question. The entire room snapped to attention. Men froze mid-laugh, mid-snicker, mid-taunt. Every eye turned toward the entrance. Captain Lewis, the senior officer of SEAL Team 7, strode in, his boots hitting the floor with authority. The room fell into a stunned silence, only the distant roar of the Pacific breaking the quiet. Lewis's gaze swept the room, lingering briefly on each man. Then, without breaking eye contact, he said simply, "Men, meet your new commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane." The air seemed to shift. The towel that had landed near Sarah's feet now hung limp and forgotten. The smirks vanished. Some men stiffened, their mouths opening slightly in disbelief. The one who had tossed the towel looked at her, then at Lewis, and back again, eyes wide, jaw tight. Sarah straightened. Her expression was calm, unreadable, yet every movement radiated authority. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence alone conveyed the weight of her experience. Years in covert intelligence operations, high-stakes field missions, and life-or-death decisions had brought her to this point. She wasn't here to argue or explain. She was here to lead. A long pause filled the locker room. Then, almost instinctively, one of the men muttered under his breath, "This can't be real." Lewis's eyes narrowed. "It's real," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And if any of you can't follow her orders, there's the door. Otherwise, you will respect the chain of command, or you will be removed from the unit." The gravity of his words sank in. Suddenly, the arrogant bravado that had filled the room seemed childish, almost naive. The men who had mocked her now looked at her differently, not as a visitor, not as a joke, but as the officer who would define the success of their team. Sarah closed her locker silently, the finality of the click echoing through the room. She adjusted the sleeve of her uniform, her eyes sweeping across the faces before her. Some looked embarrassed, some wary, and some defiant, but all were listening now. Every whisper, every laugh, every doubt had been replaced by anticipation. This was the beginning. The locker room had been the first test, and Sarah had passed without a word. The real challenges were waiting outside, in the surf, on the training grounds, and eventually, in a war zone where hesitation could cost lives. As she turned toward the exit, boots hitting the tile floor in deliberate rhythm, one of the younger men, barely able to meet her gaze, whispered, "Ma'am, I guess we'll see what you've got." Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to. She had already proven more than words could convey. The unit had no idea what she was capable, but they were about to find out. Outside, the sun broke through the fog, casting sharp beams over the Pacific. The day promised grit, sweat, and endurance. For Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane, it promised nothing less than a battle for respect, leadership, and trust. And she was ready. The locker room, once alive with laughter and mocking whispers, now lay silent, almost reverent. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane walked to the center, her uniform crisp, boots echoing on the tile, every step measured and deliberate. The men who had jeered moments before shifted uncomfortably, their bravado evaporating like fog over the Pacific. Even the toughest among them, battle-hardened veterans of multiple deployments, seemed unsure how to respond to her presence. "Listen carefully," she said, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable authority. "I didn't come here to lecture or negotiate. I came here to lead. And leadership is proven, not assumed." A smirk appeared on one man's face, a lieutenant who had tossed the towel at her the previous morning. "Oh yeah?" he challenged, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You gonna show us how it's done?" Sarah didn't flinch. Her eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "Yes," she said simply. "And we'll start now." She moved toward the exit. The men followed, curiosity mixed with unease. Outside, the base stretched out under a pale morning sun. Training obstacles, surf entry points, and mud courses awaited them, each a test of endurance, skill, and teamwork. Sarah led them to the grueling SEAL endurance course, a test that separated the prepared from the unworthy. "Run," she commanded. "Full gear. 30 miles. No shortcuts. No whining." Laughter broke out at first. 30 miles? One man scoffed. "You've got to be kidding." Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she tightened her gloves and started at a pace that was deliberate, controlled, yet unrelenting. Within seconds, the squad was forced to pick up the pace just to keep up. The sand scraped at their boots, the salt air burned their lungs, and the weight of their gear pulled them down, but Sarah pressed on, her movements fluid and disciplined. By the 10th mile, some men were already beginning to falter. One of the junior operators stumbled in the surf, coughing as water filled his mouth. "Come on," he gasped, looking at her. "Keep moving," Sarah said, her tone firm but not cruel. Pain is temporary. Mission success is permanent. The group fell into an uneasy rhythm. Those who had mocked her now fought to keep up, their earlier arrogance replaced by silent determination. Sarah observed them like a hawk, noting weaknesses, correcting form, and adjusting pacing. Every step was calculated, both for the men and for herself. Halfway through, the towel thrower fell behind, gasping for air. His pride burned more than his lungs. "I'm fine," he wheezed, though his legs trembled. Sarah slowed just enough to meet his gaze. "I didn't ask how you feel. I asked if you're moving. Keep up." Her eyes, icy yet focused, carried the weight of someone who had walked through war zones, made split-second life and death decisions, and survived when others didn't. There was no room for excuses, no tolerance for mockery. She set the standard, and the men had no choice but to follow. As the miles dragged on, fatigue gnawed at the unit. A few collapsed to the sand, unable to continue. Sarah paused only briefly, helping the weaker soldiers to their feet, checking their gear, and motivating them with quiet words. Her leadership wasn't loud or theatrical. It was precise, measured, and unyielding. By mile 20, the group was reduced. Only the strongest, most determined soldiers remained. Sarah didn't slow, didn't waver. Her boots left prints in the wet sand, each step a testament to her endurance. Her breathing was steady, controlled, a rhythm that anchored the group as much as her presence did. Finally, as the sun began to crest higher over the horizon, Sarah led them to the final obstacle. A high wall with ropes dangling from the top, mud below, and a sheer drop on the far side. "One at a time," she instructed. No hesitation, no fear. The men watched, tense, as she approached the wall. With a fluid motion, she scaled it effortlessly, swinging over the edge and landing softly in the mud below. Not a word was spoken. She turned and signaled for the next man. One by one, they followed, their confidence slowly returning, not in themselves, but in her leadership. After the wall, Sarah finally stopped, breathing evenly, soaked in sweat and grit. She looked at the group, now quiet, humbled, and attentive. "Now that we're done doubting, let's start training," she said. The men who had mocked her in the locker room glanced at each other, shame and respect mixing in their expressions. The lesson was clear. This woman was not a visitor. She was a SEAL. She was a commander. And she would not be underestimated. Later, as they gathered around a makeshift briefing area, Sarah outlined the next phase of training. Her method was meticulous. Each drill, each exercise, each simulated mission had purpose. Nothing was arbitrary. The men listened, some silently impressed, others still processing the reality. Their new commanding officer had just put them through a test none had expected, and most had failed. One of the veterans, the loudest critic from the locker room, finally spoke up. "Ma'am, I didn't think anyone could run that course like that. Not even some of the old instructors." Sarah looked at him evenly. "Then don't think. Act. Follow the plan, execute it, and you'll survive. SEALs don't survive on assumptions. They survive on action." Her words cut through the remaining skepticism like a blade. Every man in the group felt it, a mixture of awe and fear not of her, but of failing under her command. This was the moment the hierarchy had shifted. She had claimed it silently, without threat, without shouting, with only her actions and presence. As the sun climbed, drying the sweat from their uniforms, the men finally began to understand. Respect could not be demanded, it had to be earned. And Sarah Kane had just earned theirs, in sweat, grit, and the unyielding proof of endurance. By the time they returned to the barracks, the earlier laughter and mockery had vanished completely. The locker room had been their first battlefield, and Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane had emerged victorious, not through intimidation, but through demonstration, strength, and unwavering leadership. That evening, as she prepared her equipment for the next day's drills, Sarah allowed herself a small, satisfied nod. The unit would test her again, doubt her again. But now, they had seen the standard she expected. The seed of respect had been planted. And from it, a team capable of extraordinary action would grow. The locker room incident was over, but the real work, the forging of SEA, L Team 7 under her command, was only beginning. Dawn broke over Coronado, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and gold. The Pacific air was sharp with salt, carrying the faint roar of training helicopters overhead. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane gathered her team on the beach, their boots sinking into the damp sand. Today was not about endurance or personal toughness. It was about tactics, teamwork, and proving that SEAL Team 7 could function as a cohesive unit under her command. The men, still nursing sore muscles and bruised pride from the previous day's run, exchanged cautious glances. They had followed her before, but the fear of further humiliation lingered. Sarah didn't address their doubts. She didn't need to. Her presence alone commanded attention, her gaze cutting across the team with the precision of a trained sniper scanning a battlefield. Today, she began, we operate as one. No individual glory. No mistakes. One team, one objective. A murmur ran through the group. Words like these were not new. They'd heard them countless times from previous instructors. But with Sarah, there was weight behind them, a tangible force that made the men straighten instinctively. The first exercise was a coordinated night insertion along a coastal bluff. They moved silently, feet sliding over sand and rocks, eyes scanning every shadow. Sarah led from the front, her movements fluid, almost imperceptible, yet commanding. She signaled with subtle hand gestures, directing the men without a word. One of the newer operators whispered, almost to himself, "She moves like she's part shadow, part storm." By the time they reached the extraction point, it became clear why. Sarah had calculated every step, every potential hazard, every angle of exposure. When a misstep nearly dislodged a crate of supplies down the cliff, she caught it mid-fall, her reflexes precise and lethal. The men watched in stunned silence, realizing for the first time that their commanding officer was not merely competent, she was exceptional. Next came the urban assault simulation, set in a mock village on the training grounds. Smoke machines churned out artificial fog, while concealed instructors fired blanks to mimic enemy positions. Sarah split the team into squads, assigning roles with surgical precision. "Alpha Team," she said, pointing at the men who had once mocked her, "cover the south flank. Bravo Team, entry and sweep. I'll coordinate Overwatch." The squads moved with tense efficiency. Every command she issued was met with immediate compliance, yet there was no rigid fear-only trust slowly building. The men who had scoffed yesterday now moved as if their lives depended on her instructions, and in truth, they did. Midway through the simulation, one team became pinned behind a barricade, smoke choking their lungs, the sound of blanks echoing like gunfire. Sarah didn't hesitate. She dropped her pack, signaling the pinned team to cover, and sprinted across open ground. Her body moved with calculated speed, avoiding fire as she reached them. With a swift motion, she neutralized the threat, using a combination of grappling and precision strikes. When she returned to the rest of the team, chest heaving but eyes unwavering, she simply said, "No one is left behind. That's the rule here. Remember it." Silence hung over the men, thick and reverent. For the first time, the team saw not just a commanding officer, they saw someone who would go into danger alongside them, who would put her life on the line for theirs. Respect wasn't being demanded anymore. It was being earned. The afternoon brought live fire exercises and tactical problem-solving drills. designed to test their cohesion under stress. Sarah orchestrated ambush simulations, requiring split-second decisions. Every time a soldier hesitated or faltered, she corrected them, not with ridicule, but with clarity. "Hold your line," she barked as a young operator panicked. "Eyes up, trigger discipline. Think, then act. Hesitation will get you killed." The trainee swallowed hard, adjusted, and completed the maneuver successfully. Sarah didn't praise him extravagantly. She nodded once and moved on, letting the lesson sink in. By the end of the day, the team was exhausted, mud-caked, sweat-soaked, and physically battered, but mentally transformed. They had seen Sarah in every role: tactician, leader, instructor, and operative. Her presence had turned a group of individuals into a functioning unit capable of calculated action. Back at the beach, as the sun dipped low into the horizon, Sarah gathered the team. The silence was expectant, the kind that precedes judgment or reflection. "Today," she said evenly, "you learned a lesson. Leadership isn't about orders shouted or respect demanded. It's about action. You follow or you fail. We succeed together or we fail alone. The choice is yours." The men absorbed her words. Some shifted uncomfortably, the memory of yesterday's mocking still fresh, yet now tinged with humility. Others simply nodded, understanding that the woman before them was not to be questioned. Even the towel thrower, who had been so defiant hours earlier, approached her hesitantly. "Ma'am, I get it now. You earned this. Every damn word." Sarah regarded him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded once. "Good. Now act like it. Tomorrow we push harder. You will see what SEAL Team 7 is capable of when we move as one." As the men packed up and made their way back to the barracks, a subtle shift had occurred. The locker room mockery had been replaced by cautious respect. The whispers of doubt had been replaced by discussions of tactics and strategy. Sarah had not just led them through exercises, she had transformed their perception of what leadership looked like and what it meant to follow someone who would never ask them to do what she wouldn't do herself. That evening, she sat alone on the beach, scanning the horizon. The Pacific waves crashed relentlessly, a reminder of the challenges yet to come. She knew the unit would be tested again, by missions, by enemy fire, by doubt. The foundation had been laid. SEAL Team 7 had begun to understand what it meant to follow Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane, and for the first time, they felt ready to meet any obstacle under her guidance. Tomorrow, they would train harder. They would strategize faster. They would fight smarter. And the women who had once been mocked in that locker room would continue to prove day by day that leadership is not about gender, but about capability, courage, and unwavering commitment. The night air cooled, washing away the sweat and sand of the day. But in the hearts of SEAL Team 7, a fire had been lit, and Sarah Kane had fanned it to life. The morning sun cast a sharp, almost blinding glare over Coronado's training grounds. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane stood at the edge of the course, clipboard in hand, observing her team. Today's drill was designed to push them beyond endurance or tactics. It was designed to test their decision-making under life or death pressure. "Today, there are no easy choices," she said, her voice firm, carrying over the roar of distant waves. "You will face unexpected variables. You will fail. And then you will learn. This is not just training, it's preparation for the real thing. Every movement matters." The men glanced at one another nervously. The drill involved simultaneous challenges, live-fire exercises, hostage simulations, and timed extraction missions, all with unpredictable variables designed to simulate real-world chaos. No one would be allowed to act without thought, and mistakes could cost them critical points. The first scenario began with a mock hostage rescue. Smoke machines churned out thick fog, and instructors fired blanks to simulate enemy gunfire. Sarah split the team into squads, assigning them precise roles. Her choices were deliberate. The men who had doubted her were placed in high-pressure positions, forcing them to rely on her guidance. Alpha Team, cover the North Corridor. Bravo, advance through the main building. I'm coordinating Overwatch, she instructed. Every word was deliberate, leaving no room for misinterpretation. As the teams moved through the smoke, confusion erupted. Alarms blared, instructors shouted simulated threats, and the chaos was immediate. One squad froze under the pressure, a younger operator hesitating before moving through an open doorway. Sarah didn't flinch. Sprinting across the training yard, she reached the team, crouched low, and signaled them forward with precise hand gestures. Her presence calmed the chaos, her voice cutting through the noise, eyes sharp. Move as one. Cover each other. The squad advanced, executing her instructions flawlessly. The men who had mocked her before watched in awe, realizing that following Sarah's lead meant surviving and succeeding. Next came the live-fire navigation exercise, a test designed to simulate infiltration under enemy observation. The team moved silently through a dense obstacle course filled with elevated positions and concealed snipers. Every misstep triggered alarms, forcing recalculations. One of the senior operators whispered, almost to himself, "I've never seen anyone coordinate like this. Not even in real ops." Sarah's eyes scanned constantly, analyzing terrain, movement, and timing. When a simulated sniper fired near one of her men, she signaled him to duck, then neutralized the threat with a controlled movement and directed fire. The operation continued without a single casualty. The men who had doubted her began to murmur among themselves, respect slowly replacing disbelief. They realized that Sarah Kane wasn't just competent. She was exceptional, blending strategy, action, and leadership in ways that surpassed even seasoned instructors. By mid-afternoon, fatigue had set in. Yet Sarah wasn't finished. She introduced a final, unannounced twist, a multi-objective extraction under time constraints, combining all previous drills into a single high-pressure scenario. "Everything you've learned today," she said, eyes scanning the group, "will be tested now. There's no margin for error. Every decision counts. Trust each other and trust me." The team moved into position, tense, every heartbeat loud in their ears. Sarah's calm, unwavering presence anchored them. One by one, they navigated the simulated urban environment, rescuing hostages, neutralizing threats, and coordinating extraction points. During a particularly dangerous maneuver, one operator stumbled, simulating an injury. Sarah didn't hesitate. Sprinting forward, she secured the injured man, covering him from potential fire while signaling the rest of the team. The drill continued without pause, her decisiveness keeping the operation on track. When the exercise concluded, sweat-soaked and exhausted, Sarah gathered the team. Silence hung in the air, punctuated only by ragged breathing and the distant crash of waves. "Today you learned something important," she said, voice steady. "Leadership is not about who shouts the loudest. It's about who acts first, who calculates, who protects. Respect is not demanded. It's earned. And trust is not given lightly. You have seen me act. You have seen the standard expected. From now on, the choice is yours: follow that standard or step aside." The men absorbed her words. Some shifted uncomfortably, their earlier arrogance gone. Others nodded quietly, finally understanding the depth of her capabilities. Even the most skeptical among them had no choice but to acknowledge her authority and competence. Later, as they regrouped near the training barracks, one of the operators, quiet until now, spoke up. "Mom, I didn't realize. You? You're incredible. I mean, we all fought well, you know. But today? Wow. Sarah studied him briefly, her face unreadable. Then, with a nod, she said simply, "Good. Now act like it." This is what SEAL Team 7 looks like under pressure. Tomorrow, we'll push further. We'll test strategy, endurance, and decision-making. And we'll keep improving until there's no doubt none of us fail on my watch. That evening, as the team returned to the barracks, the dynamic had shifted completely. The locker room mockery of yesterday was gone. The men who had jeered now exchanged quiet glances of respect. Conversations centered not on doubt, but on tactics, teamwork, and the incredible skill of their commanding officer. Sarah walked alone along the beach, the Pacific waves crashing around her boots, her mind already on the next day's exercises. She knew the challenges ahead would be tougher, more complex, and more dangerous. But she also knew one thing. The team was beginning to trust her. And in the world of SEAL operations, trust was the only thing that separated survival from failure. Tomorrow, they would face even more rigorous trials. But for the first time, Sarah Kane's SEAL Team 7 was not just a group of soldiers, they were a unit. And under her command, they would learn to fight, survive, and succeed as one. The briefing room was quiet, the air thick with anticipation and the faint scent of coffee and gun oil. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane stood at the head of the table, her uniform immaculate, her gaze scanning the faces of her SEAL team. This wasn't training. This was real. The lives of civilians and operators alike would depend on every decision they made. Projected on the wall were satellite images of a remote Pacific island. A U.S. research team had been taken hostage by militant forces during a humanitarian mission. The intelligence was clear. The captors were well-armed, entrenched, and prepared for a long standoff. The operation required precision, coordination, and split-second decision-making. One mistake could be fatal. Sarah clicked a remote, highlighting a section of dense jungle near the island's northern shore. "Alpha Team will insert here," she said, voice steady. "Bravo Team, flanking from the east. I'll coordinate overwatch and extraction points. Communication must be precise. Timing is everything." The men listened intently. Some scribbled notes. Others stared silently at the projected maps, trying to absorb every detail. The same operators who had once mocked her now sat in tense focus. There was no laughter, no casual remarks, only concentration and the unspoken understanding that this mission could determine life or death. "Questions?" Sarah asked, her gaze sweeping the room. A young operator hesitated. "Mom, what about support if things go south?" "Evac?" Sarah didn't flinch. "We have air support on standby. Extraction is pre-planned and contingencies are in place. But this is a high-risk operation. Your survival depends on preparation, execution, and trust. Follow the plan, trust your team, and trust me. I'll ensure we all make it back." A veteran, previously skeptical of her leadership, nodded slowly. "Understood. No room for error." Sarah's eyes met his. "Exactly. That mindset is what keeps us alive. Now, let's review the objectives in detail." For the next hour, she walked them through every step of the operation. Entry points, enemy positions, extraction routes, emergency protocols, nothing was left to chance. She paused frequently, ensuring understanding, correcting assumptions, and highlighting potential hazards. Her tactical knowledge, honed through years of covert operations and high-stakes missions, was evident in every decision, every instruction. "Remember," she said, capping the projected map, "this isn't just about speed or force. It's about precision. One shot, one movement, one decision at the wrong time can jeopardize the entire mission." Stay alert, stay coordinated, and stay alive. The room absorbed every word, the weight of responsibility pressing on them. This was no longer a drill. This was a mission where lives hung in the balance, where hesitation could cost everything. After the briefing, Sarah led the team to the armory. Weapons were checked, gear inspected, and communication systems tested. Every rifle was cleaned, every grenade inspected, every GPS coordinate confirmed. Sarah personally oversaw each step, ensuring nothing was overlooked. The operators, many of whom had doubted her before, were now learning to rely on her judgment implicitly. One of the men, the same who had thrown the towel in the locker room, approached her hesitantly. "Ma'am, I didn't expect this. Not just the plan, but how. Precise you are. I trust you." Sarah didn't smile, but her eyes softened slightly. "Good. You should. Your life depends on it." As the sun began to dip below the horizon, she gathered the team for one final review before departure. "Tomorrow, we move before dawn. Sleep is minimal. Precision is maximal. Trust each other. Trust me. This is why SEALs exist, to accomplish the impossible. And tomorrow, we will do just that." The team dispersed quietly, preparing their gear, reviewing maps, and mentally rehearsing every step. The mood was tense but focused. Sarah remained behind, scanning the mission details once more, her mind running through every contingency, every scenario. She knew the island would be a test, not just of skill, but of leadership, cohesion, and nerve. Late into the night, the base was quiet except for the occasional helicopter hum or distant wave crash. Sarah reviewed her team's readiness logs, cross-checking everything from communications to equipment. She made adjustments where necessary, leaving nothing to chance. Every operator's life was a variable she intended to control. Finally, as darkness enveloped the base, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had earned their respect through action, and tomorrow would be the ultimate test of that trust. For the first time, SEAL Team 7 would follow her into an operation where the stakes were real, where hesitation could mean death, and where her leadership would determine the outcome. The team would face fire, chaos, and danger. But they would also see firsthand the skill, precision, and calm decisiveness of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane. And as the first light of dawn promised the approach of a critical operation, one thing was certain. The men who had mocked her in the locker room would follow her without question or risk failing entirely. Before dawn, the island lay shrouded in darkness, waves crashing violently against jagged rocks. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane checked her gear one final time, the hum of the approaching helicopter mixing with the pounding of her own heartbeat. The team followed her silently, every operator tense but focused, their eyes fixed on her every move. No words were necessary. Her calm, measured presence spoke volumes. "Check your comms," she whispered. "Every channel clear. Every signal sensed. We move in precisely at 050. The rotor blades whirred overhead, slicing through the night air. As the helicopter lifted, the team observed the shoreline below, dense jungle hiding the enemy, small fires flickering among the foliage, shadows moving unpredictably. The tension was tangible. Every man knew the risk. This was no exercise. Lives were on the line. Sarah ran through the plan in her mind as they approached insertion point, Alpha. She had anticipated every variable enemy positions, ambush possibilities, extraction points. Alternate routes, but in combat, nothing could be taken for granted. The moment the helicopter descended low, she signaled the team, moving first, a steady shadow in the darkness. The team hit the sand quietly, boots sinking into wet grains. Sarah took point, scanning the jungle edges for signs of enemy movement. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, caught subtle changes in the terrain, broken branches, disturbed leaves, footprint signs invisible to anyone untrained. "Alpha, move," she whispered into the comms. "Bravo, cover east flank. Extraction ETA 30 minutes." They advanced carefully, each movement coordinated, silent, precise. Suddenly, a burst of gunfire erupted from the tree line. The team instinctively dove for cover. Sarah rolled to a prone position, signaling the team to return fire. Her rifle barked sharply, calculated and lethal. 2 hostile combatants dropped instantly, the others retreating under the team's suppressive fire. One operator stumbled, caught off guard by the sudden burst. Sarah was on him immediately, lifting him to cover with minimal motion, checking his gear, keeping him focused. "Stay down. Stay calm," she ordered. "We're moving now." The team pressed forward under her guidance, navigating the jungle with tactical precision. Every movement had purpose, every action calculated. Sarah's prior training had prepared them for this. Trust in her commands, trust in each other, and trust in the plan. Hesitation could cost lives. As they approached the research team's hold-in area, a hostile sniper opened fire from an elevated ridge. Sarah's eyes locked on the position, calculating angles and cover. She motioned the team down, took position, and neutralized the threat with a precise, controlled shot. The operator beside her exhaled, eyes wide with awe. "Ma'am, that was incredible," he muttered. "No time," Sarah said calmly, moving the team forward. "We secure the hostages, then extraction." Inside the makeshift compound, the hostages were huddled and terrified. Sarah signaled them to stay low as her team swept the perimeter, neutralizing threats with controlled precision. The team moved seamlessly, a well-oiled machine, each operator executing her strategy flawlessly. During the extraction, one operator was injured by debris from an explosion nearby. Without hesitation, Sarah went to him, providing cover and securing him safely to the extraction zone. The men who had doubted her leadership now moved instinctively, following her every command, trusting her judgment implicitly. Finally, the helicopter arrived for extraction. Sarah oversaw the loading of hostages and operators, covering the rear as the last team members boarded. Every threat neutralized, every movement precise. Her calm decisiveness had guided them through chaos, ensuring the success of the mission. As the helicopter lifted off, the team settled inside, breathing heavily but alive. The island receded below them, a dangerous place conquered through strategy, skill, and leadership. Sarah glanced at her team. The operators, exhausted and bloodied, looked back at her with a mix of respect, relief, and awe. "Mission accomplished," she said simply, her voice steady. "Everyone accounted for?" The team responded with nods, murmurs of affirmation. No cheers, no celebrations, just the quiet acknowledgement of survival and success. Lives had been saved, and the men who had mocked her now saw her for what she truly was: a leader, a tactician, and a warrior who led from the front. Back at the base, Captain Lewis met them on the tarmac. "Successful operation. All accounted for. Outstanding leadership," he said. His gaze swept the team before settling on Sarah. "Your team followed you through chaos. They trusted your judgment, and you delivered." Sarah's expression remained calm. "They trusted themselves too. I guided them, but they executed flawlessly." The men gathered their gear, sharing quiet, exhausted smiles. For the first time, the locker room arrogance, the whispered doubts, and the skeptical glances were gone. The bond forged under fire was unbreakable. Sarah had led them through the most dangerous challenge yet, proving that leadership was not a title. It was action, courage, and unwavering presence under fire. That night, as she reviewed the mission logs and debriefed with her team, Sarah allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The operation had been flawless, but more importantly, trust had been solidified. SEAL Team 7 now knew the standard expected of them, and they had seen it executed without hesitation. The locker room mockery was a distant memory, replaced by respect earned under fire. And in the quiet hours of the night, the team knew one undeniable truth. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane was not only capable, she was extraordinary. The helicopter blades thrashed against the night air, throwing up mist from the dark ocean below. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane crouched at the rear of the craft, her eyes scanning every movement on the island as the last operators and hostages were loaded. Every second mattered. One misstep, one overlooked threat, could unravel hours of careful planning and execution. Beside her, the team moved with weary efficiency, gear soaked with sweat and sand, faces streaked with dirt and blood. Yet their movements were precise, reflecting the intense discipline instilled under Sarah's command. No one spoke unnecessarily. There was no need. Actions had already spoken louder than words could convey. "Delta check?" She called softly into the comms, verifying the last operator. "All accounted for, Mom," came the reply, steady but strained. Sarah allowed herself a brief nod. The extraction point was secure, the hostages safe, and her team intact. For a moment, the weight of the operation hit her the constant calculations, split-second decisions, and life-or-death maneuvers culminating in this quiet, precarious victory. The helicopter lifted higher, moving toward the rendezvous point with support craft on standby. Inside, the operators slumped against the walls, their exhaustion palpable. Some were silent, others exchanged subtle glances of relief and awe. "Ma'am, I don't know how you do it," muttered one operator, his voice breaking slightly from fatigue. "The way you lead." We followed without question. And we made it out. Sarah's gaze swept the team, calm yet penetrating. "You followed because you trusted each other, and because you trusted me. Leadership doesn't guarantee success, but it provides the framework for it. You executed flawlessly. Remember that. Never forget what it took to get here." The team was quiet, absorbing her words. This wasn't training. This was real, and they had survived because of her presence, guidance, and unwavering focus. Respect, previously hesitant and begrudging, was now fully realized. By the time the helicopter approached the base, the first light of dawn streaked across the horizon, casting gold and crimson over the Pacific. Sarah guided the team through debriefing protocols with calm efficiency. Every weapon checked, every piece of equipment accounted for, every operator examined for injuries. No detail was too small. Survival depended on thoroughness. Captain Lewis was waiting on the tarmac. His gaze swept the group, noting the exhaustion etched on every face, then settled on Sarah. "Outstanding operation," he said quietly. "Your leadership was exemplary. Every operator followed your commands flawlessly. Hostages safe. All accounted for. Well done." Sarah acknowledged him with a brief nod. It was a team effort. They followed well. They executed well. That's what matters. The team disembarked, some staggering slightly, others walking with a newfound confidence. The men who had mocked her in the locker room were now unrecognizable in their demeanor, quiet, professional, and respectful. The arrogance had been replaced with humility, tempered by the shared experience of life-and-death operations. In the locker room that morning, the mood was transformed. No laughter, no taunting, only quiet reflection. Some operators cleaned their weapons methodically. Others stared at the walls as if replaying the mission in their minds. One of the younger men, previously vocal in doubt, finally spoke up. "Ma'am, I can't believe it. I mean, we all fought well, but seeing you lead, it's incredible." Sarah didn't smile extravagantly. She simply nodded. "I did my job. You did yours. That's what matters. Remember this: trust, preparation, and action. Those are the things that save lives. A veteran who had been openly skeptical during the early days approached her. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted his uniform. I underestimated you. I thought leadership was about orders and titles. I see now. It's about action. You led us, and we survived. That earns respect more than any rank. Sarah's expression softened fractionally, a small acknowledgement of the genuine shift in perception. She had expected doubt, challenge, and hesitation, but she had also expected excellence from those willing to rise to the standard. They had risen. Later, as the team gathered for a formal debrief, the mood was serious yet reflective. Every member recounted their perspective, every tactical decision examined, every contingency evaluated. Sarah guided the discussion with authority, asking questions that prompted introspection, teaching lessons from both success and minor mistakes. The team absorbed every word, realizing that their trust in her had been justified and their training elevated by her leadership. In the quiet moments after the debrief, as the team prepared for rest, a small metal plate was noticed hanging above Sarah's locker. Kane Team Commander. It had been placed there by one of the operators, a subtle but powerful gesture of respect. Sarah ran her fingers over it, absorbing the significance. It was more than a title, it was acknowledgement. Silent, earned, and profound. Outside, the sun rose higher, illuminating the base with clarity and warmth. The island mission was behind them, but the lessons lingered. Leadership had been proven, respect had been earned, and the bonds forged under fire were unbreakable. SEAL Team 7 had seen firsthand what it meant to follow someone who led from the front, who acted with precision and courage, and who trusted her team to execute flawlessly under the most extreme conditions. That evening, Sarah walked along the beach, watching the waves crash against the rocks. The Pacific was relentless, but so was her team now, tempered by trust, experience, and shared survival. She reflected briefly on the journey, from the mocking laughter in the locker room to the chaos of the mission, and finally, to this quiet moment of recognition. The journey had not been easy, and it would not end here. Future missions would test them further, demand more courage, and push them to their limits. But Sarah Kane had solidified the foundation: trust, respect, and excellence. SEAL Team 7 would never doubt her again. And for the first time, the men who once mocked her knew the truth. Leadership was not about gender, title, or bravado. It was about action, courage, and unwavering resolve. As she returned to the barracks, her mind was already calculating the next training schedule, anticipating future challenges. Her team rested now, but they would be ready. They had survived her leadership in combat, and they had thrived. Tomorrow, they would push further, grow stronger, and continue to embody the standard she demanded. The locker room mockery was a memory. Respect had been earned. Trust had been solidified. And in the quiet aftermath of a high-stakes mission, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane had proven beyond any doubt why she commanded SEAL Team 7. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of the barracks, casting long golden streaks across the floor. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane stood silently in the locker room, a place that, not long ago, had echoed with laughter, mockery, and doubt. Today, the air was different. The energy had shifted, subtly but unmistakably. This room, once a battleground of ego and skepticism, now carried the weight of respect, accomplishment, and acknowledgement. She ran her hand across the edge of her locker, a simple metal plate engraved with her name, Kane Team Commander. It had been placed there quietly by one of the operators after the mission, a small act, but one loaded with meaning. It symbolized not only her authority, but the trust and respect she had earned from a team that once doubted her. As the team filtered into the room, Their expressions were a mix of exhaustion and quiet pride. They carried themselves differently, now not as individuals jockeying for status, but as a unit forged under fire, tested in combat, and disciplined through leadership. The same men who had jeered, whispered, and mocked were now attentive, deliberate, and respectful. Sarah's gaze swept the room, taking in each operator. She didn't need to speak to command attention. Her presence alone demanded it. But she did, and her words were measured, precise, and deliberate. "Listen up," she began, voice calm but firm. "We have faced real challenges, and each of you performed admirably. Not because I told you to, but because you trusted yourselves, trusted each other, and trusted me. That is what makes a SEAL team exceptional." Silence followed. This was not a lecture. It was acknowledgement, reflection, and closure. The operators absorbed every word, their expressions softening with understanding. Some nodded, others exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and recognition. One of the veterans, the same who had been openly skeptical, stepped forward. His tone was quieter than usual, but filled with sincerity. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. I underestimated you. I thought leadership was just a title. But following you, seeing you in action, it's taught me more than any drill ever could. Thank you." Sarah regarded him calmly, allowing a slight nod to acknowledge his sincerity. Apologies aren't necessary. Actions speak louder than words. You've learned that lesson well. Another operator, younger and previously hesitant, spoke up. "Ma'am, I laughed in that locker room, mocked you. I didn't see it then, but now I do. You led us. You proved yourself in every way possible. I respect that." Sarah's eyes softened fractionally. She had expected doubt, challenge, and resistance, but never personal acknowledgement so raw and unfiltered. This was the reward of leadership, the quiet, unspoken validation that comes when respect is earned, not demanded. She walked slowly through the room, pausing at each locker, observing the expressions of the men she had trained, led, and tested. "You've learned more than tactics, than drills, than missions," she said. "You've learned about trust, about discipline, about what it means to follow a leader who acts, not just speaks. That knowledge will stay with you, in combat and beyond." The room was quiet, but not tense. It was contemplative, reflective, a shared acknowledgement of transformation. The men no longer saw her as just an officer or a commander. They saw her as a leader who had guided them through fear, fatigue, and chaos, and emerged not only victorious, but respected. One operator, the same who had tossed a towel in her direction weeks ago, approached her cautiously. His voice was almost unrecognizable, stripped of bravado. "Ma'am, we all see it now. You're incredible. We trust you, completely. Thank you for showing us what leadership really means." Sarah nodded, a small, almost imperceptible smile appearing. "Good. Now remember this. The locker room, the base, the missions, they are all tests. Not of me, but of you. Every action, every decision, every move, this is how we survive. This is how we succeed. And today, you've all proven yourselves capable of that." The operators dispersed gradually, some cleaning their weapons, others reviewing mission notes, yet all carrying a quiet confidence. The dynamics of the room had shifted irrevocably. What had once been doubt and mockery had been replaced with unwavering trust, respect, and acknowledgement of excellence. Alone for a moment, Sarah allowed herself to reflect. She remembered the first day she had walked into the locker room, met with scoffs, laughter, and disbelief. The contrast was striking. Now, that same room was a testament not to her authority, but to the resilience, discipline, and transformation of her team. She had earned their respect, yes, but more importantly, she had helped them earn theirs for each other. She ran her hand along her locker one last time, absorbing the symbolism of the moment. This space had once represented doubt, challenge, and resistance. Now it symbolized trust, respect, and leadership proven under pressure. It was a quiet victory, one that would remain etched in memory long after the missions and drills faded into routine. Stepping back, she observed the team one final time. Their expressions reflected pride, relief, and camaraderie. The laughter of mockery was gone. In its place was understanding, shared purpose, and the unspoken acknowledgement that leadership was not about commanding from above, but walking beside, guiding through example, and earning trust every step of the way. Sarah left the locker room quietly, the hum of activity behind her. Outside, the sun climbed higher over the base, illuminating the Pacific horizon. The day was bright, filled with the promise of new challenges, new missions, and continued growth. But for now, the team had achieved something remarkable. They had followed, survived, and trusted. They had seen leadership proven in action. The locker room remained behind her, empty but resonant, a symbol of transformation. And as she walked forward, she knew one undeniable truth: respect earned under fire, through action, courage, and unwavering presence, was far more powerful than mockery, doubt, or assumptions. SEAL Team 7 had learned that lesson. And so had she. The journey wasn't over. Challenges awaited. Missions loomed. Danger was never far. But the foundation had been laid, the trust solidified, and the men who had once laughed now stood ready, trained, disciplined, and inspired by a leader who had shown them what it truly meant to command respect. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kane had proven herself not just as a SEAL, but as a leader whose actions inspired loyalty, courage, and excellence. The locker room mockery was a distant memory, replaced by acknowledgement, trust, and the unshakable bond of a team forged under fire. And in that moment, the story came full circle. Leadership had been proven, and respect had been earned.